So hello, today we will be working on the folding knife and getting the lock bar and stop pin set up correctly. We'll also be making the pivot for it and any spacers we need. We need all this to get the lock bar set up completely. So as you can see, I have a whole bunch of different files for this, including the coping saw, which can be helpful to removing larger amounts of material. I like using golf balls as handles on the files. It's a pretty good thing. So here you can see the knife blade. So here you can see kind of how a folding knife works, and you can see why you have to file all these the little grooves so that the stop pin can come in and stop it. So as you can see, I just start with a pretty rough flat file to remove a lot of the material. You can see I'm using the paper template as kind of a starting point here. I do take this off pretty quickly though, because it isn't really reliable, and I don't want to think I'm not overshooting it and then end up that I am overshooting it by quite a bit. So so as soon as I get it about this far, I will put it in the knife and then look through the stop pin hole and make a small mark on the blade so I have a rough guideline, and then I file a little bit, put it back in the knife, make sure I'm still okay, and then I just keep going through this for probably an hour until I get the setup as close to correct as I can. And I don't go any farther on the actual lock bit setup at this point because the whole handle isn't, I don't have them connected correctly, so it might not be accurate. So you can see I got the fit up pretty good here, and of course making sure that the lock bar still has material so it can't go in. As you can see here, the lock bar still can't lock up, it can't go into the blade, so I need to remove that little bit of material there. But I'm not going to do that yet, not until I add spacers and an actual pivot pin into this knife. I'm not just using a screwdriver, because there's a lot of movement still. So here I'm just squaring up, deburring this piece of brass, and this will be the spacer, so it's going to go in the back of the knife in between the two handles. Once again, just gluing on a template so I have a rough idea of what shape to do. This is a clearance hole to let a screw go through the handle and thread into the opposite side. I did end up adding a second one of these, but I drilled that with both handles on either side. I'll show you that a little later. I wish I had thought of that in the final design. It would have been a lot easier to drill them both right now. This is a 1/4-inch piece of brass, so it's obviously far too thick for the knife, so I'm just taking a 1/2-inch end mill here and machining most of it away. I wanted a little under, about 100th thou thick, a little under 1/8 of an inch. I did want this thickness pretty accurate, because if it was far too thick or far too thin, it could interfere with the locking system and how the blade pivoted. So I'm taking it slow and getting the thickness correct. You can see I got a good finish. Here I'm roughing off a lot of the extra material. I would not have done it this way if I was doing it again, because this was not a very stable setup and could have easily thrown the part. I would have just done it all on the belt sander like I am here. I left some extra material around the lines of the cutout because I wanted to be able to sand it to final size while it was still in the titanium handles. It was all put together, so it had nice smooth transitions. I didn't want to rely on my just mating it to the lines, because that just wouldn't have worked. Here I am drilling that second screw hole through the brass and the two handles. Like I said, I wish I had done this in the very beginning. It would have been a lot easier, more accurate, but this worked out fine. There was no issues. The screw I'm cutting it out for is a socket head cap screw, 348. Pretty small screw. I had to be careful with this tap, but it worked out fine. This is just a end mill to countersink the first handle for the head of the screw. There you can see it fits well. These screws were modified. I just used my lathe. I think I have a video somewhere on my channel of doing that. It's not very complicated. There you can go. See, it kind of looks cool. I like those two screws. Here I'm machining the pivot, kind of the axle for the blade to spin on. This is out of a 1/4-inch rod of stainless steel, and I'm machining it down to 3/16 so that it kind of has a head, and the 3/16 has to be really accurate because I want want it all to fit together with almost no movement or anything. Otherwise, the lock bar and locking setups I've done will not be accurate. Because of that, I'm taking it really slow, taking light cuts, and as you can see, once I get to the end here, I'm going to use this diamond stone and some honing oil to remove the last about 4 or 5 thou. This leaves a really good finish and is also much more accurate. So there you go, you can see it fits really well. A tiny bit of movement, but that's okay, and as you can see, it's really smooth. Here I am modifying a 440 screw for that pivot I just made. This is basically the same process for any screws that I would modify for a folding knife. I also made this kind of washer because the head wasn't quite big enough. So for the lock bar, the piece that springs in and locks the blade open, the material is too thick to be able to bend. It would be too stiff if you were pushing on your finger. So I'm using a ball nose end mill here, or yeah, I guess it would be that, and to remove some of the material right at the end of the bar there so it flexes easier. I went to about 40 thou. I didn't quite measure it, but just going to what I've done on other knives, and works really well. I did this on the side of the handle that will be covered by the other handle, so you don't see it as much. You can use it as a fashion thing and put it on the outside, but in this case I didn't really want that. I just wanted to keep the clean exterior. So you can see those are that white thing right on the pivot there, that's a Teflon washer. I had to cut those little notches in it because of the way the blade was shaped, but that shouldn't make any difference. There's one of those on either side. So you can see I still need to remove a little bit of material from the blade so that that piece will go in and lock it up. The material I'm removing is at a slight angle so that it goes in and then stops moving about halfway through. So there you go, you can see that looks like maybe a 20 to 30% lockup, which is about right. So then if I hold this in there, the blade doesn't move at all. So that should be pretty good. I might remove just a touch more material because I don't like that it almost always, like you can feel it touch right there. I want it to, I don't want to have to push on this. The issue is if it's a little hard to get all the way across, then just the spring of the titanium might not hold it there. So I might remove just a tiny bit more material in the start there or off the end of the actual lock bar, but that's really close and I'm pretty happy with that. I hope this series is being helpful to somebody. Next week I will be finishing up the blade, grinding the bevels, and heat treating. Please like, comment, and subscribe to see all this.